Again, some say Washington didn't offer enough, while others say Pyongyang is playing hardball. We turn to experts for some insight. President Moon Jae-in calls for collective wisdom to prevent the nation from plunging into a deep political division. His remarks follow massive pro- and anti-government protests that shook the capital in recent weeks. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi says South Korea needs to expand its economic cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean into future growth sectors. And LA Dodgers' starter Hyun-jin is in fine form. The Southpaw gets his third career postseason victory over the Washington Nationals. NEWSCENTER begins now. Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Noadam. We begin with North Korea's top nuclear negotiator. He's blaming the US for what he called the breakdown of working-level nuclear talks in Sweden over the weekend. His remarks are being interpreted as pressure tactics by Pyongyang. Kim Ji-yeon starts us off.
North Korea's chief nuclear negotiator Kim Myung-gil continues to use tough rhetoric to express his discontent over what he calls a breakdown of denuclearization talks held with the U.S. and Sweden. Kim, on his way back home in Beijing after holding the talks, warned that a, quote, terrible incident could happen if the negotiations don't go well due to a lack of preparation by the U.S.
If the U.S. doesn't prepare properly, something terrible could happen. Who knows?
When asked whether additional talks are scheduled to be held in 2 weeks, as suggested by the U.S. State Department, Kim expressed doubts about whether Washington can bring alternative plans within that period. Before boarding a plane for Beijing and Moscow, Kim stressed that Pyongyang has no desire to engage in, quote, sickening negotiations with the U.S., followed by his statement right after the talks in Sweden that whether North Korea's suspension of the nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missiles tests will continue depends wholly on the U.S. North Korea has expressed its intent to dismiss engaging in denuclearization dialogues with the U.S. until Washington withdraws its hostile policies, and added that the deadline for talks is the end of this year. The remark can be interpreted as the regime's willingness to ask the U.S. to lift international sanctions while guaranteeing its security, as well as halting South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises and having Washington refrain from selling state-of-the-art weapons to Seoul. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's presidential office, meanwhile, says it's still too early to evaluate the talks in Sweden, adding that the door to negotiation is still open. An official at the Blue House told reporters today that although North Korea and the US still have their differences, the discussions on denuclearization are still ongoing. Although unofficial, these are the first remarks on the talks from South Korea's top office. The official added that the most important thing is to get both parties back to the negotiation table soon. Now, there is much speculation over why Saturday's talks fell apart. Our Kim Bo-kyung turned to some experts for their take.
Hopes were high for the talks in Sweden, with President Trump hinting at exploring a new method with the North. But the talks broke down, and the North's chief negotiator, Kim Myung-gil, claimed Washington had come to the table empty-handed. Opinions vary as to why the talks collapsed, but many experts believe the North was not satisfied with the U.S. offer.
They don't see much change, if any, since Hanoi, and I think this is the crux of the problem.
Other experts point out that the U.S. did make concessions and show more flexibility, but North Korea didn't see that as enough.
Well, I think the United States has brought a new method. The U.S. was very flexible, I think, this time. Considering what U.S. has been asking about the Yongbyon plus alpha, I think the alpha thing is something related to the extra production facility dismantlement in case of Hanoi. But I think in this case, the U.S. was flexible.
Professor Kim adds that Pyongyang would think it's now Washington's turn to take steps in return for the commitments it has already made, which include halting tests of nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missiles. And what they want to see most from the U.S. is the lifting of sanctions.
I think North Korea might have requested more United Nations sanctions lifting from the United States. So I think all these things were not happy with North Korea, and maybe North Korea, from the North Korean perspective, what new method the U.S. has given to North Korea was not sufficient.
It is unclear whether a new method by Washington will get Pyongyang back to the table by year's end, a deadline imposed by the North. But the North's response to the latest no-deal summit makes it seem less likely the talks will resume that soon. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
US media outlets are also offering differing views as to why the Stockholm talks broke down. Some say the Trump administration simply did not offer what the North had expected. Others say this was a typical North Korean negotiating tactic. There's also views that the US might be looking too eager. Kan Young-woo tells us more.
U.S. media outlets were quick to offer their take on lack of results from the working-level talks in Sweden. The Washington Post raised the possibility of the North Korean side coming to the negotiating table with higher expectations, with the U.S. appearing to send signals of a changed stance. For one, President Trump dismissed John Bolton, his former U.S. National Security Advisor, who was well known for his hawkish style toward the North. On top of that, Trump had mentioned a new method for the denuclearization talks with Pyongyang. With President Trump likely to face a bumpy election campaign in 2020, the chief executive of the Korea Risk Group, Choi Do-kar, also said it appears the North may be hoping that the combined effect of the ticking clock and American fears of long-range missile and nuclear tests in the year ahead will stimulate a significant shift in U.S. strategy at the last moment. However, VOA looked at the breakdown as if it was just a regular tactic for North Korea. Mintaro Oba, a former U.S. diplomat focused on Korea, was quoted as saying the North Koreans have a long history of being tough negotiators, willing to cancel or withdraw as a tactic. He added this isn't necessarily the end of working-level talks, saying it's far more likely North Korean officials conceived the breakdown ahead of the meeting, so it was not a spontaneous decision. The Wall Street Journal voiced concerns over the U.S. looking too eager to get a deal done. Quoting a former CIA analyst and North Korea expert at policy think tank the Rand Corporation, Soo Kim, the report said Washington risks looking too overzealous given the State Department's statement about leaving the door open for future talks. The report also included analysis from Professor Lee Sung-yoon, a Korea expert at Tufts University, who said North Koreans take their time and keep raising the stakes, adding that Pyongyang has the upper hand at this time. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy is on his way to Washington to hear from his U.S. counterpart details of the failed working-level talks between North Korea and the U.S. Seoul's foreign ministry said Lee Do-hoon will meet Stephen Biegun during a 4-day visit. They're to coordinate their positions and strategies on North Korea's denuclearization and building peace in the region. He will also meet his Japanese counterpart Shigeki Takizaki, as well as hold a trilateral meeting with the envoys. Reports say more than 20 people have been rescued from a North Korean fishing boat that collided with a Japanese patrol ship today in the East Sea. According to Japanese broadcaster NHK, the North Korean fishing boat sank completely into the water after clashing with the Japanese patrol ship at around 9:10 a.m. local time. Authorities still aren't sure how many people were on board, but they say the North Koreans were fishing illegally in what Japan claims as its exclusive economic zone. North Korea also claims the waters as its own. Turning to local politics now, and President Moon Jae-in has reiterated the need for a prosecutorial reform. During a meeting with his top aides earlier today, he said it's positive that people are taking to the streets to express their political opinions, but he also warned it must not deepen conflict that results in political strife. Park Hee-jun reports.
President Moon Jae-in warned that differences in political opinion should not result in a deep political clash. At a weekly meeting with his top aides on Monday, President Moon brought up the candlelight demonstrations for the first time. According to Moon, the demonstrations, some demanding reform and others calling for the expulsion of controversial Justice Minister Cho Guk, are not signs of division. Rather, they're a show of direct democracy that complements the representative democracy system. But he expressed concerns over the vigils potentially turning into a severe confrontation.
다만 정치적 의견의 차이가 활발한 토론 차원을 넘어서서 깊은 대립의 골로 빠져들거나 모든 정치가 그에 매몰되는 것은 결코 바람직하지 않을 것입니다. 많은 국민들께서 의견을 표현하셨고 온 사회가 경청하는 시간도 가진 만큼 이제 문제를 절차에 따라 해결해 나갈 수 있도록 지혜를 모아주시기 바랍니다.
Asked whether President Moon was implying that the people should refrain from further demonstrations, a senior Blue House official said it's up to the press to interpret his remarks. Saying that the public is united in its demands for the prosecution's reform, Moon reminded the Ministry of Justice and the prosecution that they need to work together to make it happen. Such a message comes a week after the president ordered the prosecution to draw up its own reform plan. It ups the pressure on Prosecutor General Yoon Sung-yeol, who has been blasted for the extensive probe into the corruption allegations surrounding Minister Cho and his family. President Moon is seen to be trying to use this momentum to push ahead with his reform drive. He instructed Parliament to hasten the legislative process for creating an independent body that investigates high-ranking government officials and transfers more investigative rights to the police. During the meeting, President Moon also assured the people that his government is doing its best to repair the damage caused by Typhoon Hagupit. With more typhoons heading this way, he called for close coordination with local governments to strengthen safety in disaster-prone areas and facilities. And he said the country is doing its utmost to contain the African swine fever and stop it from spreading south. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Around 900 ministers, government officials and private sector representatives from Korea, Latin America and the Caribbean are in Seoul until tomorrow for the 5th Korea LAC Business Summit. The gathering aims to promote a mutually beneficial partnership. Hong Yu reports.
South Korean and Latin American and Caribbean countries need to diversify their cooperation and expand further into the private sector. That's according to South Korea's Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi. Hong said that economic cooperation between the two countries used to center around resources, agricultural products, and manufacturing businesses. But from now on, cooperation must broaden to high-tech and service industries, infrastructure, and many other sectors. And among these sectors, he pointed specifically to new industries of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, e-commerce and biohealth.
Diverse finance channels must be developed, such as the participation of South Korean companies that are rich in technology and experience in public-private partnerships, as well as the expansion of syndicate loans from Korea's Economic Development Cooperation Fund and the Inter-American Development Bank.
Trade between the two regions has grown fourfold from $10 billion to $40 billion in the last 20 years. And representatives participating in the 5th Korea LAC Business Summit 2019 emphasized that the technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, like blockchain and artificial intelligence, can take those relations to the next level. But in order to take advantage of what the other side has to offer, the two sides need to work on certain problems such as trade costs.
Like we said before, the trade costs amount to 189% of the value of the goods traded. So that's 2 times that are lost in those costs: logistics, tariffs, non-tariff barriers, information, and the like. I think that's where we need to work, in overcoming, in lowering those logistics costs, those transportation costs, and those tariffs also that are still there. So we should foster more of that to open both of our economies and really look for win-win situations for economic growth, development, and for improving the lives of both our regions.
With this summit highlighting the importance of partnership between the two regions, Latin American companies are looking forward to opportunities to build strong and high-quality networks with South Korean companies and investors. Hong Yu,
Arirang News.
Korean companies dealing in future growth technologies have outgrown some of the blue chips this year in terms of market cap. Economic factors, including a slump in semiconductors, are holding back the older firms. Yoon Jung-min explains.
The stock prices of some of South Korea's biggest firms have witnessed some dramatic ups and downs this year due to increasing volatility centered around local bio and 5G companies. According to Korea Exchange, out of the top 10 listed companies by market capitalization on South Korea's benchmark KOSPI at the end of 2018, only 7 were still there as of last Friday. Telecommunications giant SK Telecom, Korea Electronic Power Corporation, and steelmaker POSCO have dropped out of the top 10, replaced by Hyundai Mobis, a firm increasingly focused on autonomous driving technology, and others. Samsung Biologics is back in the top 10 after a temporary slip when it was under investigation due to fraudulent accounting allegations. South Korea's major web portal Naver soared from 10th place to 4th, while Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix remained in 1st and 2nd place respectively.
Overall, during the past year, Korean stock markets have been mostly affected by the trade conflict between the US and China. Also, some companies were affected by slowing demand for chips. That wasn't good for Korea, which is heavily reliant on IT exports.
Bio companies on the secondary tech-heavy KOSDAQ have also seen a greater degree of volatility. They include Kolong Tissue Gene, which was suspended from trading in late May due to its controversial gene therapy Invosa. More firms involved in the 5G tech sector made their debut in the KOSDAQ's top 10, including KMW, a local manufacturer of wireless communication equipment. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Samsung Display is a step closer to having a local supply of hydrogen fluoride to replace the supply restricted by Japan under its export curbs. Industry sources say the firm has finished tests on the chemical and plans to start using it. Hydrogen fluoride is one of the high-tech materials Japan has made harder for Korea to import. Korea is working hard to find an alternative source or develop domestic replacements. South Korean pitcher Hyun-jin has given the LA Dodgers the advantage in their postseason series against the Washington Nationals. Won Jung-hwan has more.
South Korea's Hyun-jin has helped his team, the LA Dodgers, recover from their surprise loss against the Washington Nationals. The 32-year-old left-hander helped the Dodgers win Game 3 of the National League Division Series at Nationals Park in Washington, D.C. on Sunday. Ryu gave up 2 earned runs in the first 5 innings before being substituted. The Dodgers then had a massive 6th inning with Russell Martin delivering a 2-pointer to put the Dodgers ahead 3-2 before Enrique Hernandez picked up a pinch hit double and Justin Turner launched a 3-run bomber. With that massive innings, the LA Dodgers beat the Washington Nationals 10-4 to give them a 2-1 lead in the best-of-5 series, meaning they will reach the National League Championship Series if they can beat the Nationals again on Monday night local time. For Ryu, who came on to the mound 8 days after his last regular season win against the San Francisco Giants last month, the game marked his 3rd postseason career victory after beating the St. Louis Cardinals in 2013 and Atlanta Braves last year. He also lowered his lifetime October earned run average from 4.11 to 4.05. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
The Seoul City government aims to provide free Wi-Fi in key public and residential areas by the year 2022. It announced plans to raise the city's free Wi-Fi coverage from the current 31% to 100% over the next 2 years. The city plans to set up nearly 24,000 wireless access points in public venues, such as parks, parking lots, and public transportation areas. The move comes as part of the city's $860 million plan to build a so-called data-free city that encompasses the use of IoT technology. With the latest announcements, Seoul will become the first metropolitan city in the world to adapt such a system around the entire city. The former commander of U.S. Forces Korea has sought to clarify concerns regarding the upcoming transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. In a written interview on Sunday, General Vincent Brooks said President Moon's term, which ends in 2022, is not a factor in determining the timeline. Rather, he said it depends on certain conditions being met, such as Seoul's ability to exercise operational control and its readiness posture in decision-making. Brooks added it's important the transfer is not affected by a political timeline, since it could lead to further North Korean provocations. He also dismissed concerns that the UN command will replace Combined Forces Command, but he said there needs to be an expansion of the UNC in terms of managing the armistice agreement, facilitating a peace treaty with North Korea, as well as mediating pledges from the international community. Japan is apparently hoping to hold a summit with North Korea before the end of the year. The newly appointed head of Japan's National Security Secretariat, Shigeru Kitamura, said so in an interview with Asahi Weekly, set to be released on Friday. He said both sides are already in talks to set up a summit between their leaders. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe previously said he would meet Kim Jong-un with no preconditions. Korea has seen a record number of typhoons this season, but there's another typhoon out in the Pacific that could head this way. Right now, though, it isn't likely to hit Korea, but it will be extremely powerful and could cause a lot of damage wherever it makes landfall. Our Choi Jung-yoon tells us more.
A tropical storm has formed off the east coast of Guam. That's Typhoon Hagupit, and as of 4 p.m. Monday, it was about 400 kilometers east-northeast of Guam and will travel northwest towards waters southeast of Okinawa, Japan by the end of the week. The typhoon is forecast to intensify in the western Pacific Ocean with a huge amount of vapor provided from the warm ocean water. Then it might grow into a super typhoon later in the week, which experts forecast could be the biggest and the strongest of the year so far.
Currently, the typhoon is somewhere east of Guam, and the sea's surface temperature there is about 30 degrees Celsius. This type of environment can cause bigger and stronger typhoons to develop.
If it stays on its projected path, the typhoon is forecast to change direction towards Japan's Kyushu Island, with a low possibility of it impacting Korea. The government is keeping an eye on the storm as it gains strength and could shift course due to differences in surrounding atmospheric pressure.
The typhoon usually moves along the edges of the North Pacific anticyclone, so the route of a typhoon is determined by how big the high atmospheric pressure is and how much it expands. With Typhoon Hagupit, there's also an area of high pressure coming down from the southern parts of Korea, which will affect this specific route near Okinawa and Kyushu. But it's too early to say whether the typhoon will impact South Korea. A more detailed forecast could be possible as early as Wednesday.
If Hagupit does have an impact on Korea, it'll be the 8th typhoon this year to do so. That's a record number of typhoons to affect the country. The name Hagupit comes from the Philippines and means fast or swift. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
The leaders of North Korea and China exchanged letters on Sunday as their countries marked 70 years of diplomatic ties. In the letters, they promised to make those ties even stronger. Lee Seung-jae has more.
North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Sunday that the leaders of the two communist allies exchanged letters of greeting earlier in the day to mark 70 years of their countries' bilateral ties. In his letter to President Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un described the establishment of their diplomatic ties as an epical event, adding that their friendship will be immortal. The North Korean leader added Pyongyang-Beijing relations have entered a crucial period, and he promised to carry forward the excellent traditions for their friendship that is, quote, envied by the world. In his letter to Kim, President Xi called their relations a valuable asset that binds the two countries, adding it's the consistent and firm policy of China to consolidate and develop its relations with its ally, as the North was among the first countries to establish diplomatic relations with China. The two sides have been strengthening their ties in recent months, with the two leaders holding 5 rounds of summit talks since March last year. That includes President Xi's visit to the North Korean capital in June, marking the first trip by a Chinese head of state to North Korea in 14 years. Earlier on Sunday, the North state-run newspaper, the Nodong Shinmun, issued a commentary vowing to develop bilateral ties with China, regardless of the international situation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The South Korean government and lawmakers from the ruling party have agreed to expand occupational health and safety insurance to more people in the so-called special employment sector. These include irregular jobs like chemical transport, door-to-door sales and home tutors. Meeting at the National Assembly today, the two sides decided to work on changing the law to give benefits to an additional 270,000 people in the sector if they get hurt or fall ill on the job. Currently, in special employment, the law insures around 470,000 people who account for just a quarter of the total 2.2 million people in that sector. Samsung Electronics is still one of the most desired workplaces for engineering students. It ranked 8th in this year's list of the world's most attractive employers released by global employer branding firm Universum. It's the firm's highest ranking so far and the 4th in a row that it's made the top 10. The list was based on a survey of roughly 130,000 engineering students in 12 countries. US tech giant Google came on top for the 10th straight year, followed by Microsoft and Apple. It is that time now where we take a look at some of Arirang's digital media content, and Ani News is back taking a look at the top trending stories.
여기 한국 최고봉의
남과 북의 문화유산이 작지만 소중한 통일을 이룬 뜻깊은 날입니다.
The weather has gotten chilly all of a sudden, along with the autumn rain, but the showers are expected to taper off later tonight. For more details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Good evening. As you said, the weather has gotten a lot chillier in just the space of one day. Now, with the daytime highs lingering in the mid to high teens. And along with plunging temperatures, the nation saw autumn rain today, which is mostly expected to clear before midnight. And thankfully, the rain isn't heavy anywhere, with most areas seeing between 5 and 20 millimeters, while the provinces will see a bit more with up to 40 millimeters of rain. And the nation will start tomorrow with cloudy skies, but sunny skies will return again by noon. However, the cold air will continue to move over the country, keeping the mercury below the seasonal average. Now, going over to our readings for tomorrow, we can expect a chilly morning, so wear warm clothes when you are stepping outside. And Seoul will begin the day at 13 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju are a few degrees higher at 16 and 18 degrees. And to your Tuesday, we are going to see a big jump with the higher daytime highs than today. Now, Seoul will reach up to 21 degrees, while Daegu and Gyeongju hits up to 24 degrees. By Wednesday, the capital will wake up to a single-digit readings, but sunny spells will remain with us up until this weekend. Now, there are huge temperature gaps throughout the day, so make sure to dress warm and to keep yourselves warm. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That will wrap it up for this edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you as always for watching. Stay tuned for news in depth coming up next.